No child should have to pretend a birthday does not matter because a parent cannot afford a cake. Emily Brooks forced herself to smile as her 7-year-old son skipped beside her through the bright entrance of the neighborhood bakery, his small sneakers leaving faint drops of melted snow across the polished floor. Noah pressed both hands against the glass display case, his blue eyes lighting up at every colorful cake lined beneath the warm lights. "Mom," he whispered excitedly, pointing toward a simple chocolate cake decorated with tiny blue stars. "That one looks just like the picture we saw online." Emily smiled back, hoping her face revealed only happiness and not the worry tightening inside her chest. She had spent the last 3 weeks setting aside every extra dollar she could find after paying rent, buying groceries, and covering the electric bill. The birthday cake was never supposed to be extravagant. It was only 8 inches wide with chocolate frosting and Noah's name written in bright blue icing. To her son, however, it was going to be the greatest birthday surprise in the world. The bakery employee returned from the kitchen carrying a white cake box tied neatly with a blue ribbon. "Miss Brooks?" the young woman asked kindly. "Your order is ready." Emily nodded and reached into her purse for her debit card. She already knew the exact amount. She had checked her bank balance before leaving work that afternoon. Then, just as she handed over the card, her phone vibrated with a notification. Her smile slowly disappeared. An automatic payment for her apartment heating bill had processed earlier than expected. The available balance displayed on the screen was no longer enough to cover the cake. She stared at the numbers without moving. Behind her, Noah continued looking through the display window, completely unaware that everything had changed in only a few seconds. Emily quietly swallowed the lump in her throat before lifting her eyes toward the cashier. I am so sorry," she said softly. "Could you please cancel my order?" The employee looked surprised. "Are you sure? We already finished decorating it." Emily lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the growing line forming behind her. "I know. I thought I had enough. Something came out of my account this afternoon." She reached into her wallet and counted the few bills inside anyway, hoping she had somehow made a mistake. She had not. It was still $23 short. Noah finally turned around, noticing the silence. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Emily knelt beside him and gently brushed a strand of blonde hair away from his forehead. "We are just going to celebrate a little differently this year, sweetheart." Noah smiled with a maturity no 7-year-old should have needed. "It is okay," he said. "We can just have pancakes again. I like your pancakes." Emily felt her heart break and heal at the same time. Just a few feet away, a tall man waiting quietly with a coffee in his hand had witnessed every word. Daniel Harrison had walked into the bakery expecting nothing more than breakfast before another demanding day of meetings. Instead, he watched a mother quietly surrender the one thing she had promised her little boy, not because she did not love him enough, but because life had simply become too expensive. As Emily gently took Noah's hand and began walking toward the door without the birthday cake, Daniel looked at the untouched cake box resting alone on the counter. Then he made a decision that would quietly change far more than one family's birthday. Emily wrapped Noah's small hand in hers as they stepped back into the cold afternoon air, the bakery door closing softly behind them with the faint sound of a bell that somehow felt louder than usual. Snow drifted gently across the quiet street, while Noah looked up at his mother with the same bright smile he always wore. "Do you think we can still make pancakes tonight?" he asked cheerfully. Emily forced a smile that barely hid the tears threatening to appear. "I think we can make the best pancakes in the whole city," she replied. Noah laughed and squeezed her hand. "Then it will still be my favorite birthday." His words should have made her feel better, but instead they reminded her how quickly children learn to make peace with disappointment when life demanded it too often. As they disappeared around the corner, Daniel Harrison remained standing inside the bakery, his untouched coffee cooling beside the register. He looked once more at the simple chocolate cake resting alone inside its white box. Blue stars covered the frosting, and the words "Happy Birthday, Noah" had been written with careful attention by someone who clearly believed birthdays mattered. Daniel turned toward the young bakery employee. "Did she place this order herself?" he asked quietly. The employee nodded. 3 weeks ago, she came in during her lunch break and spent almost half an hour choosing the smallest cake because she said her son only cared that it had blue stars. Daniel glanced toward the front window where Emily and Noah had already disappeared into the light snowfall. "Does she come here often?" Every few months, the employee answered. She always buys something small. Muffins, cookies, whatever she can afford. She is one of the nicest customers we have. Daniel lowered his eyes toward the untouched cake again. His assistant had already sent 3 text messages reminding him about an important board meeting scheduled less than 45 minutes later. Investors from across the country were waiting for him. Multi-million-dollar contracts sat inside his leather briefcase. Yet none of those responsibilities seemed nearly as urgent as the image of a little boy smiling, because he wanted to protect his mother from feeling guilty. Daniel reached for his wallet. "I would like to purchase the cake." The employee smiled with visible relief. "Would you like us to change the writing?" Daniel gently shook his head. "No, it already belongs to someone." He handed over his credit card before adding one more request. "Please arrange for someone to deliver it to the address on the original order this evening." The employee hesitated. "Should we tell her who paid for it?" Daniel smiled quietly. "No, leave only a small note." "What would you like it to say?" Daniel looked through the bakery window as snow continued falling over the peaceful neighborhood. After a thoughtful pause, he answered, "Write this. Every child deserves to feel celebrated." The employee carefully wrote down every word. Daniel picked up his coffee and walked toward the exit, but before reaching the door, he stopped for one final glance at the birthday cake. It was not expensive. It would not change the family's financial situation. It would not solve every struggle waiting for Emily tomorrow morning. But perhaps, for one evening, a little boy would believe that the world still remembered his birthday. Sometimes hope arrived in the shape of something as ordinary as chocolate frosting and blue stars. Emily and Noah arrived home just before sunset, their small second-floor apartment glowing softly beneath the fading winter sky. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh laundry and old wooden floors, familiar comforts that usually made the little place feel warmer than it looked. Noah hurried inside first, dropping his backpack beside the couch before pulling a mixing bowl from the lowest kitchen cabinet. "We still have pancake mix," he announced proudly, holding the box above his head as though it were a treasure. Emily laughed quietly despite the heaviness in her heart. "I think you remembered exactly where I keep it." Noah grinned. "Because pancakes are important." She ruffled his blonde hair and turned toward the refrigerator, gathering eggs, milk, and butter while silently calculating how many groceries remained until payday. Every careful decision seemed measured in dollars now. She wished, just for one evening, she could stop counting. Noah climbed onto a kitchen stool and began arranging paper napkins around the tiny table. "Can I still blow out a candle?" he asked. Emily opened a drawer and found one lonely birthday candle left over from the previous year. She held it in her hand for a moment before smiling. "Of course you can." Noah beamed. "Then it is still a birthday." The simple answer filled the quiet apartment with more warmth than the old radiator ever could. Just as Emily poured pancake batter onto the skillet, someone knocked gently at the front door. She frowned, surprised. Hardly anyone visited without calling first. Wiping her hands on a dish towel, she opened the door and found a young bakery employee holding a familiar white cake box tied with a blue ribbon. Snowflakes rested on the woman's coat as she smiled kindly. "Delivery for Noah Brooks." Emily stared at the box without reaching for it. "There must be some mistake," she said softly. "I canceled that order." The employee shook her head. "Someone purchased it for your family and asked that it be delivered this evening." Emily looked around the hallway, expecting to find whoever had sent it waiting nearby. No one was there. "Who paid for it?" she asked. "I am sorry," the employee replied. "They wish to remain anonymous." She handed over the box along with a small cream-colored envelope before quietly wishing Noah a happy birthday and walking back down the stairs. Emily slowly closed the door and carried the cake to the kitchen table. Noah's eyes grew wide with amazement. "Mom!" It came back. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. Emily carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten card with neat blue lettering. It read, "Every child deserves to feel celebrated." There was no signature, no company logo, no explanation, only those 5 simple words. Emily pressed the card gently against her heart, overwhelmed by gratitude for someone she would probably never meet. Noah could no longer contain his excitement. "Can we open it?" he asked eagerly. Emily untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. The chocolate cake looked exactly as Noah had remembered, complete with tiny blue stars and his name written across the frosting. For several quiet seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Noah wrapped his small arms around his mother and whispered, "See? I told you birthdays always find a way." Miles away, Daniel Harrison sat alone at the end of a long conference table surrounded by quarterly reports and financial projections. Yet his thoughts drifted toward a small apartment where he hoped one little boy was smiling, never imagining that his anonymous gesture had already become the brightest memory of Noah's childhood. The little apartment felt brighter than it had in months. Noah carefully placed the single birthday candle in the center of the chocolate cake, while Emily searched for a box of matches tucked inside the kitchen drawer. The warm scent of fresh frosting mixed with the aroma of homemade pancakes, filling every corner of the modest home with a comfort money could never buy. When the tiny flame finally flickered to life, Noah closed his eyes tightly. Emily watched him in silence, wondering what a 7-year-old could possibly wish for after accepting disappointment with such quiet grace only an hour earlier. "Did you make a wish?" she asked after he blew out the candle. Noah nodded with a smile. "Yes, but if I tell you, it will not come true." Emily laughed softly. "That is how birthday wishes work." Noah carefully sliced the first piece of cake with more concentration than skill before placing it on a paper plate and carrying it toward his mother. "The first piece is always yours," he said proudly. Emily looked at the small slice, then at her son. "I think the birthday boy should have it." Noah gently shook his head. "You work harder than me." Those simple words caught her completely off guard. She accepted the plate with trembling hands, realizing that children often notice sacrifices adults tried so hard to hide. Later that evening, after Noah had fallen asleep curled beneath his favorite blue blanket, Emily quietly washed the dishes before picking up the small handwritten card once more. Every child deserves to feel celebrated. She traced the neat lettering with her fingertips, trying to imagine the person who had chosen those words. They felt personal, almost as though someone understood exactly what it meant to stand at a bakery counter wishing love alone could pay the bill. She slipped the card into the family photo album beside Noah's first baby picture, deciding it belonged among the memories that truly mattered. Across the city, Daniel Harrison finally returned to his penthouse apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline. The lights below stretched endlessly into the distance, but the silence inside his home remained unchanged. He loosened his tie, set his briefcase beside the entryway, and poured himself a glass of water before stopping beside the large living room window. His phone buzzed with another message from his assistant confirming that the board meeting had ended successfully and every agreement had been approved. Daniel barely glanced at the screen. For the first time in weeks, the numbers seemed strangely unimportant. Instead, he found himself wondering whether the little boy had smiled when he opened the cake box. He remembered Noah's cheerful voice inside the bakery saying pancakes would be enough. Most children would have cried. That little boy had tried to protect his mother's heart instead. Daniel quietly smiled to himself. The following morning, Emily arrived early for her shift at the neighborhood grocery store where she worked as a cashier. She greeted customers with the same kindness she offered everyone, despite the exhaustion that lingered behind her eyes. Around noon, one of her coworkers hurried toward the front registers holding a newspaper. "Emily," she said excitedly, "did you see this? Harrison Foods is sponsoring a community appreciation event downtown this weekend. They are giving away free meals and hosting activities for families." Emily glanced briefly at the article before returning to her customer. The company name meant nothing to her. She had no way of knowing that the man whose quiet generosity had transformed Noah's birthday would soon cross her path again, this time not as an anonymous stranger hidden behind a handwritten note, but face to face in a moment neither of them could have expected. Saturday morning arrived with clear blue skies after a week of steady snow, and downtown Chicago buzzed with families gathering for the Harrison Foods Community Appreciation Festival. Bright balloons lined the entrance to the city square, while local musicians played cheerful melodies that drifted through the crisp air. Children laughed as they hurried toward craft tables, face-painting booths, and rows of volunteers serving warm meals. Emily almost decided not to come. Long shifts at the grocery store had left her exhausted, and she worried that free community events often carried an uncomfortable feeling of accepting charity. But Noah had spotted the newspaper advertisement on the kitchen table before she left for work the previous morning. "Can we go?" he had asked with hopeful eyes. "I want to thank whoever made this happen." Emily smiled at the memory as they walked through the entrance together. You still want to thank someone you have never met? Noah nodded without hesitation. Maybe they are nice like the person who sent my birthday cake. Emily gently squeezed his shoulder. Maybe they are. They wandered through the festival, stopping to watch children decorating cookies and families enjoying warm bowls of soup together. Everything felt welcoming rather than extravagant. Volunteers greeted every guest with genuine smiles instead of rehearsed greetings. There were no expensive banners celebrating the company, no oversized photographs of executives. The entire event seemed designed to make neighbors feel like neighbors. Across the plaza, Daniel Harrison quietly arrived without an entourage. He preferred walking through community events unnoticed whenever possible. Wearing a simple navy jacket instead of a tailored business suit, he shook hands with volunteers, thanked local vendors, and stopped to speak with elderly residents who had supported the neighborhood for decades. His assistant had suggested scheduling media interviews that morning, but Daniel politely declined. He believed kindness became less meaningful the moment it turned into publicity. As he crossed the square, a familiar laugh caught his attention. Daniel turned toward the sound and immediately recognized the little blonde boy chasing bubbles near the fountain. Noah's joyful laughter echoed through the plaza exactly as Daniel had imagined while sitting alone after the birthday delivery. Emily stood nearby watching her son with quiet contentment. For the first time since the bakery, she looked genuinely relaxed. Daniel remained where he was for a moment, uncertain whether approaching them would disturb their morning. Before he could decide, Noah accidentally bumped into him while running after a floating bubble. The little boy looked up quickly. I am sorry, mister. Daniel smiled warmly. No harm done. Noah noticed the volunteer badge clipped to Daniel's jacket. Do you work here? Daniel chuckled softly. Only today. Emily hurried over, slightly embarrassed. Noah, you need to watch where you are going. Then she looked at the man standing before her. Something about his calm expression seemed strangely familiar, although she could not explain why. Daniel offered a friendly smile. He was simply chasing a bubble. Noah looked up at Daniel with complete sincerity. My birthday was the best one ever. Daniel's eyes softened. I am very glad to hear that. Emily thanked him politely before guiding Noah toward the next activity, unaware that she had just spoken to the anonymous stranger whose quiet act of kindness still rested safely inside her family photo album. While Daniel watched them walk away, wondering whether destiny was gently arranging another chance for their paths to cross. The afternoon passed gently as families slowly began leaving the community festival with balloons, handmade crafts, and warm meals tucked beneath their arms. Noah walked beside Emily carrying a small paper dinosaur he had painted at one of the children's activity tables, proudly explaining every color he had chosen. Emily listened with a smile, grateful for a day that had cost almost nothing yet had given her son memories he would treasure for years. As they approached the main exit, Noah suddenly stopped beside a volunteer table stacked with children's books waiting to be donated to local schools. His eyes immediately settled on a hardcover book filled with colorful illustrations of dinosaurs. Mom, he whispered, look. Emily glanced at the book, then at the small sign beside it. One book per child. She smiled. Go ahead. Noah carefully picked it up as though afraid someone else might need it more. Thank you, he quietly told the volunteer before hugging the book against his chest. Daniel, who had been helping another volunteer pack food boxes nearby, noticed the exchange from several yards away. He remembered the excitement in Noah's voice at the bakery and smiled to himself. Some children chased expensive toys. Noah treasured a single book. Before Emily and Noah could leave, a sudden gust of wind swept across the plaza, lifting several volunteer forms from a nearby registration table into the air. Papers fluttered across the sidewalk like white birds. Without hesitation, Emily hurried forward to help gather them before they scattered into the busy street. Noah quickly joined her, carefully collecting pages while making sure not to crease them. Several other visitors simply walked around the mess, assuming someone else would clean it up. Within minutes, every page had been returned to the elderly volunteer who had accidentally dropped them. Thank you, the woman said gratefully. Most people kept walking. Emily smiled modestly. Someone once reminded me that small kindnesses matter. Daniel heard every word. They were almost identical to the belief that had quietly guided his own life for years. He walked over carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate from a nearby refreshment stand. You both earned a warm drink, he said with an easy smile. Emily looked surprised. That is very kind, but you really do not have to. I know, Daniel replied. Sometimes it is simply nice to share one. Noah accepted his cup with both hands. Thank you, mister. The three of them stood together near the fountain while light snow began drifting through the afternoon sky again. Conversation came naturally. Noah eagerly described his favorite dinosaurs. Emily spoke about working at the neighborhood grocery store. Daniel mostly listened, asking simple questions that showed genuine interest without ever making the conversation about himself. There was something unusually comfortable about him. He never interrupted, never tried to impress anyone, never mentioned his profession. As the sun dipped lower behind the buildings, Emily checked the time. We should head home before it gets dark. Daniel nodded. It was nice meeting both of you. Noah smiled brightly. Maybe we will see you again. Daniel returned the smile. I hope so. As Emily and Noah walked toward the parking lot, one of the festival coordinators hurried across the plaza calling out, Mr. Harrison, the television crew is ready for your interview, whenever you are. Emily instinctively turned at the sound of the name. She watched as volunteers and organizers respectfully gathered around the quiet man who had spent the afternoon handing out hot chocolate and carrying donation boxes. Confusion slowly crossed her face. The modest volunteer Noah had spoken with so easily was suddenly being greeted as the founder of the entire event, and for the first time Emily realized that the stranger she had just met was far more than he had ever allowed himself to appear. Emily remained standing near the festival entrance long after Noah had climbed into the passenger seat of their aging sedan. She watched volunteers gathering equipment while television cameras surrounded the man she had known only as a kind stranger. Daniel Harrison answered every interview question with the same calm humility he had shown while handing children cups of hot chocolate only minutes earlier. He spoke about neighborhoods, families, and community rather than business achievements or financial success. Not once did he mention himself more than necessary. Emily quietly started the engine and drove home with thoughts she could not organize. She had met many successful people while working as a cashier over the years. Most arrived surrounded by attention before speaking a single word. Daniel had spent an entire afternoon carrying boxes, picking up litter, and listening to children without ever introducing himself. That difference stayed with her. Later that evening, after Noah had fallen asleep with his dinosaur book resting across his blanket, Emily opened the kitchen drawer where she had carefully placed the handwritten birthday card. She read the familiar sentence once more. Every child deserves to feel celebrated. Then another memory quietly surfaced. The calm voice at the festival, the thoughtful questions, the same gentle smile. A possibility slowly formed in her mind. She drove to the neighborhood bakery the following afternoon during her lunch break, intending only to buy 2 muffins before returning to work. The young employee behind the counter immediately recognized her. How was Noah's birthday? She asked warmly. Emily smiled. It turned out better than I ever imagined. She hesitated before lowering her voice. May I ask you something? The employee nodded. The person who paid for the cake. Was he tall, with dark hair and blue eyes? Surprise briefly crossed the young woman's face before she smiled knowingly. I suppose you figured it out. Emily lowered her eyes. I met someone this weekend. The employee glanced around to make certain no customers were waiting. He asked us not to tell you his name because he wanted the gift to belong to Noah, not to him. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. So it really was him. The employee nodded gently. He never asked for recognition. He only wanted your little boy to have his birthday. Emily thanked her quietly before stepping outside into the cool afternoon sunlight. She stood on the sidewalk holding the small bakery bag without moving. Gratitude mixed with uncertainty. She wanted to thank Daniel properly, but she also understood why he had remained anonymous. Some acts of kindness lost their beauty the moment they became public. Across the city, Daniel finished reviewing several proposals inside Harrison Foods headquarters when his assistant entered carrying the week's correspondence. Among the letters sat a handwritten envelope with no return address. This arrived at the foundation office, she explained. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a simple thank you card decorated with a child's drawing of a chocolate birthday cake covered in blue stars. Beneath the drawing, written in careful handwriting, were just a few words. Thank you for helping my mom smile again. Happy people make better birthdays. Love, Noah. Daniel looked at the drawing for several quiet moments before placing it gently inside his desk drawer instead of filing it away with the other letters. It became the only piece of correspondence he chose to keep within reach, never imagining that the little family whose lives had unexpectedly touched his own would soon return with an opportunity to transform one kind gesture into something that could brighten thousands of birthdays for years to come. Several weeks passed, yet the small drawing of the birthday cake remained inside Daniel Harrison's desk drawer where he saw it every morning before the first meeting of the day. It sat beside contracts worth millions of dollars, but somehow it always captured his attention first. Whenever business discussions became tense or complicated, he would glance at Noah's carefully colored blue stars and remember that genuine success could never be measured only by numbers. One afternoon, Daniel invited the director of the Harrison Foundation into his office. "How many birthday programs do we currently sponsor each year?" he asked. The director reviewed a report before answering. "Only 4 community events. They reach approximately 100 children." Daniel remained silent for a moment. "That is not enough." He looked once more at Noah's drawing before continuing. "Every child deserves at least one day each year that reminds them they matter. Let us build something larger." The director smiled. "What did you have in mind?" Daniel replied without hesitation. "A nationwide birthday initiative for families facing financial hardship. Partner with local bakeries instead of replacing them. Support neighborhood businesses while making certain children receive a birthday cake regardless of their circumstances." Work on the new program began immediately. Across town, Emily continued balancing long shifts at the grocery store with raising Noah on her own. Life remained challenging, but something inside her had changed since that snowy birthday. She found herself looking for small opportunities to help others in the same quiet way someone had once helped her. One evening, an elderly customer realized she had forgotten her wallet after an entire cart of groceries had already been scanned. Embarrassed, the woman apologized repeatedly while preparing to leave without her food. Emily quietly paused the transaction and asked the manager if the groceries could be held until the customer returned. During her lunch break, she used part of her own paycheck to cover the woman's bill anonymously. She never expected anyone to know. The following week, Emily received an unexpected phone call from the bakery owner. "We are organizing a children's birthday event with support from the Harrison Foundation," the woman explained. "We need volunteers, and you were the first person who came to mind." Emily accepted immediately. Saturday morning filled the bakery with laughter as volunteers decorated cupcakes and wrapped small gifts donated by local businesses. Noah eagerly helped place colorful paper hats on each chair while proudly telling every child where the balloons should go. Daniel arrived quietly before the celebration officially began, hoping to thank the bakery staff for partnering with the foundation. As soon as he stepped inside, Noah spotted him from across the room. "Mom," he shouted excitedly. "It is the nice man from the festival." Emily turned and smiled warmly. This time there was no uncertainty in her expression. She walked toward Daniel carrying a small white envelope. "I have been hoping I would see you again," she said. Daniel smiled. "It is good to see both of you." Emily handed him the envelope. "This is not money," she explained before he could answer. "It is simply something I wanted you to have." Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was the original handwritten birthday card he had sent with the cake. On the back, Emily had written one additional sentence beneath his own words. "Your kindness did not end with one birthday. It taught us how to celebrate other people too." Daniel looked up from the card, deeply moved. In that quiet bakery filled with children's laughter, he realized the greatest gift had never been the cake. It had been watching kindness continue its journey from one heart to another, growing stronger each time someone chose to pass it forward. 1 year later, the first Saturday of spring arrived beneath a bright blue Chicago sky, and the neighborhood bakery looked almost unrecognizable. Long tables stretched across the sidewalk, covered with colorful birthday cakes decorated in every imaginable theme. Volunteers laughed as they tied balloons to chairs while families slowly filled the street with cheerful conversation. A banner above the entrance simply read, "Every child deserves to feel celebrated." There was no oversized company logo, no photographs of executives, only children waiting excitedly for their names to be called. Emily adjusted the last row of cupcakes before stepping back to admire the room. She had become one of the volunteer coordinators for the Harrison Foundation Birthday Initiative. helping organize celebrations for children whose families could not easily afford them. Every month, she met parents who quietly reminded her of herself on that snowy afternoon outside the bakery. She understood their hesitation, their pride, and their determination to give their children joyful memories despite difficult circumstances. Because she understood, they trusted her. Noah, now another year older, proudly welcomed each child at the entrance with a paper birthday crown in his hands. "Happy birthday," he repeated again and again with genuine excitement, making every guest feel like the celebration had been planned especially for them. Daniel arrived early carrying several boxes of handmade birthday cards created by local elementary school students. As always, he greeted every volunteer by name before quietly helping arrange tables instead of standing apart from everyone else. Emily noticed him balancing a stack of chairs and smiled. "Some things never change." Daniel returned the smile. "I hope not." Together they watched the first group of children gather around the largest cake in the room. Their laughter echoed through the bakery, filling every corner with the same warmth that had once transformed one little apartment on a cold winter evening. During the celebration, a young mother approached Emily with tears in her eyes. "I almost canceled my daughter's birthday this year," she admitted softly. "Then someone told me about this program." Emily gently squeezed her hand. "I know exactly how that feels." She glanced across the room toward Daniel, who was kneeling beside a little boy, helping him light birthday candles while letting the child take all the attention. Emily realized something important in that quiet moment. Daniel had never really given Noah a cake. He had given her family hope during a season when hope had become difficult to find. That hope had continued growing until it reached families they would never even meet. As the afternoon came to an end, every child gathered together to blow out candles at the same time. Dozens of tiny flames danced beneath the soft spring light before disappearing into joyful laughter and applause. Noah looked up at Daniel with the same bright smile he had worn on his 7th birthday. "Do you think we made everybody happy today?" Daniel looked around the room before answering. "I think all of you made the world a little kinder today." Emily stood quietly beside them, holding the original handwritten birthday card that had remained safely inside her family album for more than a year. The paper had become slightly worn along the edges, but the words still carried the same quiet truth. Every child deserves to feel celebrated. She folded the card carefully and slipped it back into her purse, knowing it no longer belonged only to her family. It belonged to every parent who had ever worried they could not give enough, every child who had ever wished for one unforgettable birthday, and every ordinary person willing to prove that the smallest act of kindness could become the beginning of something far greater than anyone ever imagined.